My name is Stephen Henderson. I'm the editorial page editor at the Detroit Free Press and the host of Detroit Today on WDET, also the host of American Black Journal on DPTV. See, I can't even keep it straight. I want to welcome you to the second panel today, but before we get started, I want to mention that we've got some students in the back rear, the back right of the room, and we want to welcome them from the University of Windsor, from Dryden High School, from Ann Arbor Trail Magnet, University Prep Schools here in Detroit, International Academy of Macomb, and Riverside Academy of Dearborn. Let's give them a big hand. And so the purpose of this panel is to try to put some of what we've talked about today in a Detroit context. How are we doing with global competitiveness and foreign investment? And what do some of the people who are investing here think about our city, our region, and the opportunities here? So joining me to my immediate left are Sandy K. Perua, who is the president and CEO of the Detroit Regional Chamber. Perua joined the Chamber in 2010 after a distinguished career in Washington, D.C. He served President George W. Bush as the administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration. In his role, he was responsible for the SBA's $18 billion small business loan portfolio. Prior to leading the SBA, Perua served as U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce. He led the Economic Development Administration, served as a senior advisor to Commerce Secretary Carlos Gutierrez regarding the 2010 census, and represented the U.S. at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris, France. He holds a Bachelor's of Science from the University of Oregon and a Master of Business Administration from Willamette University. I will note right now that Sandy is the only person up here who does not hold a degree from one of our universities here in Michigan. We won't hold that against him. Sitting next to Sandy is Roderick Miller, a results-oriented leader with over 10 years of experience in economic development, strategic planning, trade and foreign investment, and project finance. His skills as a negotiator, policy expert, and corporate strategist have been honed in over 10 countries. Currently, Miller is serving as president and chief executive officer of the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation. Miller holds a Master's of Public Policy from Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government and a Bachelor of Science in International Business from St. Augustine's College. Next to him is Dr. M. Manikin, who's the chairman of the SACTHI Group. Manikin is currently chairman of the SACTHI Group, which is a group of companies established in the year 1921 by Manikin's grandfather, Mr. Najimuthu Gounder. The group currently has a turnover of about $2 billion and has presence in sugar, automobile components, dealerships for commercial and passenger vehicles, retail finance, education, information technology, and health services. He's been working in the SACTHI Group since 1980 and has established 3 sugar factories in India, automobile component businesses in India, Portugal, the US, and China, a soybean processing plant in India, and has started various educational institutions such as engineering colleges and agricultural colleges in India. And finally, we have David Zulko, who's the vice chairman of Garden Fresh Salsa. He founded his first specialty food company more than 20 years ago. Today, he's an equity partner in multiple successful food enterprises, most notably Garden Fresh Gourmet, makers of the #1 brand of fresh salsa in North America, with revenues in excess of $100 million, where he serves as vice chairman. He's also an operating partner at Huron Capital, a Detroit-based private equity firm with over $1 billion under management, serves on the boards of the $60 million Grow Michigan Venture Fund, of Jimmy Buffett's charitable foundation, Singing for Change, on the executive board of the largest food rescue organization in the country, Forgotten Harvest. I want to start with Sandy and Rod. Just give us an update on where we are with this global investment and competitiveness issue that we've been talking about this morning. How is Detroit doing, particularly in comparison to some of the other cities we heard mentioned here this morning?
I think we're learning to crawl. I'd love to say that we're up and running, but we're not yet. And I think that one of the benefits of this initiative by JPMorgan Chase and Brookings that it's really shining a spotlight on what we don't know. So what's happening now in the region is that we have some individual standalone programs that are pretty good. Automation Alley, many people are familiar with Automation Alley. It started out in Oakland County, is now a regional operation. Its primary role is to help medium-sized companies in this region export, and they do a terrific job. They really do. We at the Chamber, we have individual programs that focus on medium-sized technology firms and advanced manufacturing firms, automotive firms, to hook them up to the global supply chain. So they may be suppliers to Ford or GM or another local company, but we're trying to get them out in the global supply chain. And that program is working really well, and it's actually now part of the MEDC's Pure Michigan Connect program. As effective as these individual programs are, we don't have a shared roadmap or strategy. So we don't really know where we're going as a region. One of the other learnings from our engagement with Brookings and JPMorgan Chase is that we don't know what our existing companies really want and need and what their opportunities are for foreign direct investment and export. So we have a long way to go.
I would just follow up by saying I completely concur, but I'd add that the region, even though there isn't a coordinated strategy, of course, because of our history in automotive and making things, there's a strong base here, not only in foreign direct investment, but also in trade. But when we look at the city grossly underperforms as it relates to foreign direct investment and trade promotion. And a lot of that is a byproduct, I think, for the first time in many years, in several decades, the city is in a position to actually be proactive around going out and trying to bring in new investment. So the city grossly underperforms as a region as a city vis-a-vis the region, vis-a-vis other cities of comparable size and scale. So it's going to be really important kind of in the coming years that we have a focused effort to figure out how do we help companies in the city not only trade and export items, but also how do we attract more foreign direct investment, recognizing within the context of the region that the city is a very important piece.
Dr. Manick and Mr. Zilko, talk about how you see Detroit as outsiders and insiders. I mean, both of you have activities here in Detroit, but how do you compare Detroit to some other cities where you do business?
Okay, we have about 3,200 people working in our automotive business as such, and totally about 15,000 in our group in total. And what I've been saying this morning is that you're beating yourself to death. I mean, saying about what Detroit is doing. I mean, from my perspective, operating in India versus operating in Detroit is like no sweat.
So we're not like India.
No, I mean, it's really fun operating in India. We need to know. In fact, I did my MBA in the University of Michigan, and I graduated in '80. When I went back, my professor was saying that I really wanted to go back to India, and why don't you want to work in the U.S.? I mean, you studied in the U.S. How are you going to apply an MBA degree in the U.S. in India? I said, you taught me to play poker with 5 cards, right? In India, we play the same game with 12 cards. Right? You just increase the degree of difficulties, but it's the same game. So now, operating in India for 35 years with 12 cards, coming back to Detroit, it's 5 cards. It's a breeze. Okay. And what we're looking at, in fact, I looked at the study that Brookings done. We're talking about greenfield versus mergers and acquisitions. We are here as a greenfield. We are building from ground zero. So we are building a plant which is probably about 3 to 4 generations ahead of the other competition that we have in Detroit. So we are talking about really advanced technology. We're talking about telemetry. We're talking about robotics. It's a very advanced thing. So what we need to do is train people. We need trained manpower available. We are looking at training people. We are looking at collaborating with the colleges, collaborating with institutes. That's where we need the support of the city. And we're very happy with the support that we are getting from the city the county, and the state, and of course the government of the U.S. I mean, people from select USA have been to Coimbatore, where I come from. There are a lot of people who have come and approached us, who have supported us. So we are very happy with the kind of support that we have, and I think we can make a great success of our business. We've been invited by General Motors to come here in 2012. We did not have presence in the US, and they actually asked us to come to the US and China. So we now have operations both the US and China. And we are going to be using the US operations as a global manufacturing footprint for aluminum. And we will also be using, right now we're using this as our design base as well. So it's going to be a global operation out of Detroit, right downtown. We are hardly about 5 miles from here. It's exciting, and we are very happy to be here, and we should thank all of you for the support, and we're feeling at home.
Mr. Zocco?
My company, Garden Fresh Gourmet, is kind of a microcosm of what's possible in Detroit. For those of you who don't know, we're kind of an only in America story. We were founded 18 years ago by my partner and his wife, Jack and Annette Aronson. They were operating a small 1,200 square foot restaurant just outside of Detroit at 8.5 in Woodward, struggling to say the least. And when I say struggling, I mean $450,000 in debt. They never thought they'd get out of it. Jack was desperate to pay his electric bill, and one day he pulled out a 5-gallon bucket, peeled onions by hand, and within 15 minutes created what is today the #1 brand of fresh salsa in the United States. And right, salsa from Detroit, it's almost counterintuitive. My favorite line along these lines was I was in LA meeting with one of my buyers, and he looks at the label, and Jack and I were there together, and he says, this is the best fresh salsa I've ever had. And he goes, you two are from Detroit? He goes, what'd you do, get lost coming out of Texas? Whoever heard of salsa from Detroit? You're supposed to be making cars in Michigan. Whoever heard of such a thing? So again, we're kind of one of those only in America stories. It is possible here in Detroit. With respect to the initiative that JPMorgan Chase is doing, I really think it's applicable to the food industry. There's a dynamic, undeniable, unstoppable revolution happening, and it's cultural in this country with respect to food. And in essence, people want local, authentic, genuine food products. And this is manifesting itself in a lot of ways. If you go to a restaurant, you'll see the farm-to-table movement. One of my favorite examples is Anheuser-Busch. For 23 consecutive years, Budweiser beer has been losing market share in this country. Think about all the talent, all the resources, all the money they have. They cannot fight City Hall. They cannot fight these market forces. What's happening is that people are gravitating to craft beers, locally produced craft beers. And it really is undeniable. If you look at the Kraft merger with Heinz, they are essentially saying all these highly industrialized, commoditized foods, that's something of the past. So these companies are merging together, dramatically cutting their costs, because they know they're never going to be able to revive them. I mean, trust me, you're never going to see an organic Velveeta. I mean, that is not in the plans to revive these old school brands. So food companies, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've never seen the environment better for food companies to not only survive, which 15, 20 years ago you were lucky if you do, but indeed thrive. Because again, of market forces moving in direction of people wanting local, genuine, authentic. And if you're in an operating state like the city of Detroit or a state like Michigan, the local food retailers here are blessedly provincial. I mean, Meijer, Bush's, Hiller's, even national chains like Whole Foods and Kroger, they do an incredible job of featuring local products, and consumers want them. So again, for people like JPMorgan to be investing in this area, food startups are a tremendous way to go. The environment's never been better. Now, having said that, every once in a while, you're going to have a company break out from just being a local, beloved food company. You look at Bell's Beer in Kalamazoo, they're national, maybe semi-regional. You look at Garden Fresh Gourmet, again, from our very humble origins, the back of a frankly bankrupt restaurant 18 years ago. We're the #1 brand of fresh salsa in the United States. We're the 3rd largest hummus manufacturer in the United States. We're the 9th leading brand of dips. We have 200,000 square feet of manufacturing space. I mean, we're really the premier manufacturing company in our field. So every now and then you are going to get companies break out. And when they do, they can become real anchors in your community. We operate in Ferndale, just outside of Detroit. I get a report every Saturday. As of last Saturday, we had 457 employees. We're by far the #1 employer in Ferndale, and you can really become an anchor in your community. And for what it's worth, I highly recommend being the the #1 employer in the community. Last year, I got pulled over by a police officer in Ferndale for allegedly speeding. So I gave him my driver's license, my registration, and my Dave Zilko vice chairman card. And they're right across the street from the police headquarters from our plant. And we keep them stocked with chips and salsa. The assistant chief of police, he moonlights as our security director. So the officer said, and he handed me back, he goes, Mr. Zilko, I've got two things to say to you. One is try to watch your speed, and two, and more importantly, have a nice day. So again, it's
I hope we don't have any prosecutors out.
So anyway, again, food is really in a special situation right now. You know, Willie Sutton said, why do I rob banks? It's, you know, because of where the money is. There really is money to be made in food, both locally, and again, every now and then you can break out nationally, and then there's a lot of things internationally which are allowing us to export. We're now exporting to Canada, and Detroit is really critical for that because we're, of course, 12 minutes from the river. We're the #1 brand of fresh sauce in Canada. We ship over $1 million a month there. But we're also shipping to Europe now, and we're also shipping to Asia, too. We're in Korea. I want to emphasize that's South Korea. We're working on North Korea. It's not going too well. You know. That movie, The Interview, didn't help.
Talk about what you guys are doing at Eastern Market with small entrepreneurs and getting them ready to try to enter that global market.
Yeah, and my partner, we both come from extremely humble origins, and it's actually, we're stunned by what's happened to us. We did $110 million in sales last year. We never thought we'd be this big. We're shipping over 1 million units a week, and to be honest, it's really been a humbling experience overall. So we love what's happening in the food scene. We love trying to mentor upstart food companies, and if you think about it, it's the barriers to entry in food are comparatively low. It's not necessarily a capital-intensive business, especially when you're just starting out. So there really is an environment where food companies, again, cannot just survive but thrive. But to get them going, they often need a place to make it, which can be very challenging. Again, we were found in the back of a restaurant. They need a place to make it. They need guidance with respect to food safety. So we're partnering with Eastern Market, and Eastern Market is set up a commercial kitchen there. We've actually got one on our Garden Fresh campus too in Ferndale, where we're bringing in food entrepreneurs who have ideas, and we review their ideas ahead of time, and if we sense the proper passion, because you never really know what's going to hit, we will provide them with a place to make their products. We'll give them guidance with respect to food safety, and then on top of that, we try to give them strategic direction. It's pretty hard to go in a major retailer in the United States that doesn't have one of our Garden Fresh products on the shelf. So we try to give them strategic direction for who to contact, how to approach people like Walmart, how to approach people like Safeway, Kroger, people we do business with on a regular basis. They all have different business models, and if we can help them navigate that, the hope is that we can dramatically accelerate their growth so that one day, hopefully, they'll be the biggest employer in their community too.
Dr. Manicum, you said some really nice things about doing business here in the U.S. as compared to other countries. I'm curious, though, what are some of the barriers you see here in Detroit? What are the things that we could be doing better to be more attractive to companies like yours from around the world?
A couple of things that we're looking at. In fact, we're trying to take an initiative ourselves. When we looked at the profile of Detroit, you have about 70% as single parents. You know, that's a major challenge when you have 70% of your workers as being single parents. So they are doing a double duty. I mean, they're doing a lot of work on the house as well as this. So this is something where we thought, okay, we'll support them. We want to have a daycare in our factory so that anybody who works with us actually can leave the child in the daycare, and we could probably run it at 30% of the normal cost or 40% of the normal cost. So that will probably help. And similarly, what we also thought was that you could have a takeaway home, a food home, you know, normally every establishment runs a canteen where the employees get subsidized food, but it's only for the employees. So we said, let's expand it. So when they go home, they could probably take the same subsidized food in number of portions to the number of children that they have. So this again is not going to cost the company anything, but it's going to kind of, you know, extend and hold the loyalty. So this is something we are looking at, and from a city perspective, I think what we need is support in training. We need a lot of people trained, so we need to establish training schools. So we're looking at tying up with the community college or the local schools to see if we can start training people. This is something where we are looking at really cutting out technology. I mean, you're looking at that kind of technology, you don't have too many people who are qualified in that. So this is a qualified manpower is a major issue. And from a perspective, I'm not sure how far or how soon the city can do it, rapid transport. I mean, you need your suburbs and the city center to be connected. Detroit is not very well connected, in terms of rapid transport. There's something where we think it might be, but that's going to be a tall call.
And is that about getting employees from home to work, or is it also about other parts of your business?
No, it's about getting employees back and forth. I mean, if we have good communication, the employees can come and go without a problem. That's basically what we think is going to be interesting. Because I was just reading the other day about somebody who walked to work 10 miles a day in Detroit. I mean,
I think
that's something
20.
you don't want.
Yeah. So Rod and Sandy, all of the things he just was talking about point to the deep poverty that we have here in Southeast Michigan, and especially in Detroit. Obviously, that is a barrier itself to foreign investment. That we aren't preparing people for the workplace. People don't have the kind of opportunities here that they should, and that they would find other places. So what are we doing about that, or what can we do about it?
I mean, the number one driver of investment decisions by businesses is, of course, talent. Can I get people that are smart, that are trained, that are able to help me make more money in your market than some other market that we're competing with? And we do have a long way to go. But when I look at kind of the Detroit story, I also see that there's an incredible amount of unemployment in the market. There's an incredible amount of underemployment in the market. And whereas we know many cities that have very, very low unemployment levels have the opposite problem. So companies come and they wonder, am I going to be able to find people because are there people there? Here in Detroit, what we've got is a latent talent pool that we have to figure out how to better leverage. And so I think critical to moving forward as it relates to the talent question is stronger workforce development programs. I mean, we've got the Detroit Employment Solutions Corporation, we've got the community college system, we've got community groups such as Focus Hope that provide trainings. But the reality is that it has to be driven by the business sector. Businesses have to say, this is what we need to be successful, and there has to be strategic relationships. The public sector can't be the key driver of the investment of the talent conversation, because the public sector doesn't know what businesses need. Businesses know what they need, but the responsibility of the public sector is to provide the appropriate vehicles for businesses to link in and to provide the insights into where their companies need to go and what training needs to happen.
So, Stephen, that's a great multifaceted question. So if you look at the number of nations that are represented doing foreign direct investment in the city of Detroit, it's about 14 or 15 different nations. If you look at Southeast Michigan as a whole, that number jumps from 14 to 41. So in the region, we're actually quite strong, but as Rod said earlier, the disinvestment in the city has been great. So there's a couple different ways you can look at that. One, if you are looking at it just solely from a city perspective, just the city perspective, you can say, oh my goodness, isn't it terrible? None of the investment came into the city. We choose to look at it a little bit differently. Isn't it great that those companies and nations chose to invest in Southeast Michigan and not some other place? Some other part of the world or even some other part of the United States. They chose Southeast Michigan. So the question is, how do we better balance out the investment and make not the suburbs less attractive, but make the city more attractive so we are kind of one rising region as opposed to a region that has kind of the dynamic that we have now, where we have these very wealthy suburbs. I mean, some of the wealthiest suburbs in the country are right here. You live in most of them, and a city that still continues to struggle. And it goes down to what Rod said. It's about talent, and when you look at the city of Detroit, we have a huge talent issue in terms of a lack of education and literacy problems and things like that. which are greater than just about every other metro city out there. But when you start looking at the region, we're number 7 in PhDs in the country. We're number 1 in engineers on the planet. I mean, the level of talent, and if you look at where the jobs are and where the incomes are, it is where the talent is. So when we have these debates here in the city about things like a community benefits ordinance that would require, enough, or X number or X percentage of people who work at a company that comes to Detroit to be Detroiters, that is great in concept, and there isn't a company out there, and Dr. Manicom's company is a perfect example of that, there isn't a company that doesn't want to hire Detroiters. The question is, where are the skills?
Go ahead.
Yeah, if I could just add on to that, I agree with Sandy's point. I mean, one of the things that's really interesting, I mean, in context, Detroit really for the first time in 30 or 40 years is in a position to compete and to expand. This is the first time we're seeing a reverse trend in terms of investment coming in the city. We know that a lot of the most progressive companies want to be in urban environments. They want to be in the city. Young people want to be in the city. They want to be kind of in areas that have, this vitality and this vibrance and this energy that cities bring. Detroit is positioned because even with the blank slate of the bankruptcy, it would be very difficult for a community of less than 700,000 people to support an infrastructure that was built for 2 million people. So we've got a very big question here in the city and in the region about how do we make Detroit sticky for talent? And how do we leverage when I sell, even though my job is the city of Detroit, when I sell the city of Detroit, I sell the entire region. We know that workforce is regional. We know that assets are regional. So you've got to look at it as a region. But when we think about the city and kind of where economies are going and where companies want to be, the city is well positioned because we've got an opportunity to repopulate and actually to rebuild in a very thoughtful way where we could actually be a center of global activity for smart, talented people from around the globe.
Just a quick follow-on. So going back to Bruce's presentation that kicked off the morning, cities, metro cities like Detroit have an inherent competitive advantage, and that the world is moving to metropolitan areas. That is where companies want to be. That's where people want to be, especially young people. And, we actually have that opportunity, and we're seeing it happen in Detroit. And what's happening in Detroit is the trajectory of every other city. Stephen and I are really familiar with Washington because we lived in that area for a while. Washington had a very similar trajectory as Detroit in terms of, it peaked in the 1950s, it went through a lot of challenges, and even today, as wealthy and as cosmopolitan as Washington is, it is not back population size to where it was in the 1950s. But the people who moved back to Washington were led by empty nesters and young professionals, and that's exactly what's happening in Detroit, and that is a huge sign. We need to bring the families back. That is hugely important, but the leading edge of that is always empty nesters and young professionals.
Mr. Zocco, tell me about what in your business you see as barriers here in Detroit. What's holding you guys back that's unique to this city or this area?
I can honestly say nothing. Anything that can be done in this country with respect to food can be done in Detroit, and I think Detroit in particular, Michigan in general, is just doing a fantastic job of fostering an agriculture industry, fostering a food processing industry. The state of Michigan, Sandy and I were just talking about this, they do an incredible job of sponsoring trade missions. Again, the area is belovedly provincial, both with respect to retailers and consumers. We're 12 minutes from the river, so it's very easy to export to Canada.
So if that's true, why aren't we doing better? If there isn't anything wrong, if there are no barriers, why aren't all the indicators much higher for us, the positive indicators much higher?
Yeah, with respect to food, I think we're doing terrific. I really do. You got, again, companies that broke through like Bell's Beer and Garden Fresh, but you got people like McClure's Pickles. They're occupying 25,000 square foot plant in Eastern Market. There are a lot of people in food who are doing really well. We're centrally located both in the United States and Canada, so we're easy to ship to both coasts and to Canada. I think Detroit is uniquely positioned to really make a serious move in food, and I really encourage people to invest in it because it really can happen.
As someone who's relatively new to the Detroit market, I will say Detroit beats up on itself worse than any place that I've ever been in.
You noticed
I mean,
that?
it is an impressive city, it's an impressive region, it's an impressive state, and I've lived in a lot of different places. I find the assets here in the city and in the region to be world-class assets, people here to be really, really smart. We've had some challenges in terms of infrastructure, in terms of disinvestment. I think those 3 points that Bruce hit on in terms of how we rebuild our economy are really, really key. I think we've got to have a clear plan. I think we've got to be thoughtful about what kinds of investments, reinvestments in infrastructure make sense, and we've got to be much more bullish on our story, because I actually think there's a very good story in Detroit, and we just have to do a better job at telling it.
One of the things that Bruce talked about was this relationship that's been established between Chicago and Mexico City, that they've signed a trade pact between the two cities, and he talked about the importance of identifying not just a country that you can do business with, but a specific city, because that's where things happen. So what's our Mexico City here in Detroit? What's the city we ought to be looking at and saying, here's the place we ought to get form a better relationship with to grow our foreign investment?
Well, one that we're looking at and actually have a really deep relationship with is Torino, Italy. And we've had the relationship with Torino, Italy, even before the whole FCA development. That is the kind of automotive and mobility capital of Italy, and obviously we are the automotive mobility capital of the United States. So we find some synergies there, and it's not just around automotive, it's around aerospace, it's around other advanced composite light materials and things like that. And if I can just expand on that and take a slight detour, one of the questions that we get a lot, and I'm sure Rod gets it a lot too, is automotive. Are we going to hang our hat on that old industry? And I love that question, because like Rod, I'm relatively new to this area, and when I came here 5 years ago, I was really surprised that this region and this state wasn't doubling down on the automotive industry, because the rest of the world would give their two front teeth to have what we have in terms of capacity and talent, research and development around automotive. And it would be one thing if this region were known for making 8-track tape players, or buggy whips. But the global demand for automobiles or four-wheeled wonders, whatever you want to call them, personal transportation conveyance devices, is only going to expand, right? And the next, and the next bogey for us in Michigan and Detroit is not necessarily, assembling the next Fusion and Volt, although that's important. It's that vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to vehicle, connected vehicle, autonomous vehicle, and we need to own that. And with 375 R&D facilities right around the Detroit region, we need to own that.
Okay, we're going to go to Q&A in the audience. There are two roving mics on my right or left. If you have a question, stand up and introduce yourself. Right there.
Hi, I'm Paul Yuskramak, Altarum Institute. This is going to sound a little silly, but I've noticed thus far we haven't heard anything about the weather. And I know that we can't change the weather, but since we can't, and that poses stiff competition, I'm wondering what other amenities you might point toward, and I'd also be interested in you, Dr. Katz, your perspective, what other amenities that are important to attract investment.
Does anyone ever tell you the weather's too bad here and I'm not coming?
Just real quickly, there are regions in this country and this world that have similar weather, if not worse weather. Minneapolis, St. Paul, for example, has some weather very similar to ours, and they're rocking. They are absolutely rocking. I mean, so their cold weather has not impacted their ability to grow. Chicago has very similar weather to us. We have the former mayor of Chicago in the audience today. They're rocking as well, too. So weather is not the, and listen, I'm from the West Coast. This whole snow thing, I'm still getting used to it. Not a big fan of it, but that's not the reason why we're not thriving.
Other questions?
Andrew Humphrey.
He's the weatherman, right? Tell us about that.
Perfect.
Good segue. Thank you, sir.
Set it out.
Andrew Humphrey, WDIV Detroit. I do weather and news on TV. It's good to know people are still watching. That's good. My question is there an opportunity, from what I'm hearing so far on the panel from Mr. Miller and also our other guests, on public and private partnerships? I understand what you said, Mr. Miller, about maybe the public sector not being the main driver or the catalyst when it comes to development or growth. But from what I'm hearing about trying to get Detroit and other regions connected through a widespread transit system, that certainly requires public money. And when you're talking about skills, from what's come from the federal government at least from the executive administration, the president mentioned the possibility of free community college as a possibility within the next few years, or the advancements that are happening with online education. Is there an opportunity there for Detroit and Southeast Michigan when it comes to public and private partnerships?
I'll kick that off by saying the only way that we move forward is public-private partnerships. There's no other way to do it. The public sector can't do it by itself, and the private sector can't do it by itself. So there has to be some really thoughtful partnerships. What do those partnerships look like? Well, there are a couple of things that drive that conversation. One is what's going to drive investment in the city. So we know that things that are going to drive investment in the city or in the region are going to be things like, what's the quality of the transportation system? What's the quality of talent in this market? Those are things where there has to be a huge investment in order to move the economy forward. And I will tell you that the public sector, we often, those of us that are in the public space or the quasi-public space, we often think that we know the issues that businesses have. We kind of do, but we don't know them the way that the businesses have it. So the idea is that the businesses need to define the scope of the problem, because businesses will tell you very clearly, this is why my business isn't making money. This is why I didn't expand in your market. So businesses will define that for you. The public sector, on the public side, it's our job to figure out, okay, what are the channels to making that happen? How do we pull together diverse businesses that have shared interests to create refined training programs that will service a variety of businesses? How do we make significant investments in mass transit to the places where we know that there are significant employment centers, or where we want there to be significant employment centers? Those are the kinds of things that are going to have to happen. So what it takes is, it takes both public and private investment. It takes a clear vision or a clear strategy, and that strategy is driven by the private sector with significant input in the channels being opened by the public sector. And then I think it takes an understanding of kind of where your population centers are in terms of people. So you have to make sure that those investments are centered around where people are or where you want people to be.
On the community college piece, a quick poll. How many here know that there is free community college in the city of Detroit right now? Raise your hands. So basically it's everyone who's on my board. So through the Detroit Regional Chamber and the governor, through the Michigan Excellence in Education Foundation, if you go to school in Detroit, if you go to school at a public school, a parochial school, a charter school, an EEA school, it doesn't matter. And if you graduate with a D+ average, it doesn't matter what your grade point is, as long as you graduate from a school in Detroit and you live in Detroit, we will send you to any one of 5 local community colleges completely free for 2 years. That exists today in Detroit right now. And there's additional scholarship programs that exist for high-performing students in the public schools, and we're trying to marry up those 2 programs through our work with the Community Foundation of Southeast Michigan. So you all, as leaders of this community, if you could help get that word out, that if there are students in Detroit, they have free community college at their doorstep waiting for them.
Okay, one last question.
Talking about exports and transportation earlier, what are your thoughts regarding Proposal 2? And are there any other options other than Proposal 2 to build our infrastructure
Proposal
and roads
1.
during Detroit?
It's Proposal 1.
Proposal 1, I'm sorry.
Yes. Proposal 1, which would add a penny to the sales tax, reduce some gas taxes, essentially get us about $1 billion more a year for roads, also raise some money for schools and local governments. May 5th, I think, is the date that we go vote on that. Is that our way forward? Everyone knows what I think. It's already been in the paper.
We're very quickly, it is it looks far more confusing than it actually is. It is really hard to put on a bumper sticker. So it's not a clean, easy to digest plan, but it does work. It does actually make a lot of sense. We're in favor of it as well too. Every business organization in this state, with the exception of one, the Michigan Chamber, has endorsed it. The Michigan Chamber has just been neutral on it, but everyone else has said we've got to do this. In terms of is there another option, there is no plan B. Every state legislator has their own plan B, so it's basically plans A through XX. There is no one unified plan. So if this does not work, if proposal 1 does not pass, we are not only at square one, we're at square -1. And it'll be another at least easily a year before we can get a solution in place, and that's best case scenario.
And I would just add to that, this state has such great bones in terms of infrastructure, but everywhere around the globe we're seeing massive investment in infrastructure expansion for competitiveness reasons. If we do not make these critical investments, we're going to continue to have significant challenges in growing further.
And quickly, how important is infrastructure to the kind of decisions you guys make about where your businesses are? Dr. Manicum?
Infrastructure, as I mentioned, commuting. Today what we find is commuting is an issue for for the workers. Second one is schooling system. If you actually had a much better schooling system in the city, you probably would have people moving back from Troy and other places into the city. So actually today you're losing out people, mostly, let's say, talking about qualified immigrant workers who are coming in, are looking at good school districts. So that's something we need to build up.
We produce 31% of all the fresh salsa in the United States. We're about a quarter mile from I-75. Our trucks leave all over the country daily. We ship $1 million to Canada. We're 12 minutes from the bridge. We need infrastructure. I'm all for proposal 1. All for
So you also need us to get that bridge built.
Yeah.
Okay, let's thank our panel.
So let me just thank Stephen and the panel and to all of the speakers today, Mayor Duggan and the Detroit Economic Club. I want to acknowledge Mayor Daley. There's probably no greater example in this country, probably in the world, of a mayor who created a true global city in Chicago. So we're thrilled that you're part of it. I also want to say, there's a reason that we were so eager to work with Brookings, and I think you saw it in Bruce's presentation and the materials. There is no institution, I think, literally in the world that has the breadth and the depth of experience and expertise that Brookings has. In fact, we were in Washington with Mayor Boris Johnson from London a few weeks ago, and he said, well, why doesn't Europe have a Brookings institution? There's really no one who can do what they do, and we're just so thrilled to partner with them. I just want to take a couple of minutes to underscore why these kinds of gatherings are so important, why our firm is putting so much time and energy and resources behind them, and some of what we have learned over the last 3.5 years through the Global Cities Initiative, as well as through our investment here in Detroit. It would be hard to dispute that we are, as a country, and frankly you can say this about most countries around the world, living through one of the most significant periods of change since the Industrial Revolution. The combination of economic and technological changes developments is changing almost every aspect of our lives. But for all of the benefits these changes can bring, for all the benefits these changes are bringing, it would be hard to, it would be a mistake to ignore the challenges, to fail to confront the areas where we are falling short, particularly in bringing more Americans along with the benefits of this economy. There are far too many Americans who are being left out of today's economy. And I think what you now see in the political discussion, the political dialogue, a consensus across parties that there is so much uncertainty about the economic future for too many Americans. Yes, people acknowledge the unemployment rate is dropping, but long-term unemployment is still far too high. Wages are not keeping pace with inflation. I want to mention one statistic, if you don't know. Today, the share of the national income that goes to wages and salaries in this country is at its lowest point in 50 years. just think about it. It is not sustainable. It's not sustainable for our economy, and it's not sustainable for our political system. In our view, what we have learned is the best place to address this challenge is in our cities. Bruce talked about in his brilliant presentation this morning that cities are transforming the global economy, but they're being transformed themselves by this massive influx of the world's population. By 2050, there will be 2.5 billion more people living in cities than there are today. So cities have truly become the center of our most pressing social and economic and environmental challenges. But equally important, and what we have learned and what we have seen, is that cities are the place where partisanship is put aside, where people are coming together like today to address the real challenges and to develop practical solutions to address them. And what Detroit has learned, and many cities around the world have learned, is cities have to evolve themselves. They can't rely on the old approaches of the old historic funding or expect the federal government to come in and rescue them. They have to find new ways of doing business, which is why this conversation is so important. What we have learned through the Global Cities Initiative is this: we've created this new dialogue between cities. So you have Columbus and Seattle coming here talking about what they're doing. Cities are looking to each other, because a program that works in Chicago may be useful in Mexico City, or something in San Diego may solve a problem in London. And there's so much clearly to learn here in Detroit. There are lessons of caution, but there are real lessons of optimism. And what we see in Detroit's revitalization and the collaboration and the partnership and the leadership that is going on here is a blueprint for other cities. So don't sell yourself short about what you have to teach other cities about how to come back, how to deal with real problems, and understand that the world is truly watching. There was a report just a few weeks ago out of Europe. The London Economist talked about all the positive developments going on in Detroit, people moving back downtown, the problems being addressed, the innovation, the entrepreneurship. But they also talked about the need for investment. They talked about the need for foreign investment, and they talked about the need for domestic investment. And we made the decision to invest in Detroit, JPMorgan did, because it was the right thing for Detroit, but it was also the right thing for our firm. We've been part of this city for 80 years, and we thought we had an opportunity to leverage not just our resources, but our expertise and our capabilities and our relationships to really make a difference in the city. And Mayor Duggan did a better job than I could talking about the results of our work, but we couldn't be more pleased. And from an investment standpoint, what we're seeing already is the fruits of our labor. We've got millions of dollars already being deployed to develop commercial and mixed-use real estate. The mayor talked about our work in the neighborhoods, our workforce development work. But I think, and the last panel talked about this also, one of the most important investments we believe we have made is in the spirit of entrepreneurship and innovation that's happening in this city. The mayor called it the rebels and the entrepreneurs. The work that we're doing through Tech Town and Bisdom, and they talked in the last panel about Easter Market, and David talked about the food revolution. We see that. We were very pleased to be part of completing the commercial kitchen at Easter Market. In fact, I'm coming back next week for the official opening. We see the innovation. I tell you, when you meet with these young entrepreneurs, the spirit and the determination that they are bringing to this city is really unmatched, and that's where we see the future of Detroit. As the mayor told you, our chairman, Jamie Dimon, has made Detroit a personal priority, which helps getting others involved in the company. When the chairman's on board, that kind of helps. And so the commitment has extended throughout the entire firm. As many of you know, last fall we sent a group of our top managers from around the world to Detroit to work with some of your best nonprofits, including Easter Markets. We want to bring some of our expertise to bear. We've got another group coming at the end of next week, because we see building the capacity and the strength of your nonprofit sector is critical to the future of Detroit. In everything we are doing, what we are trying to do is reaffirm not only our commitment to the city, but the need to make long-term investments. And Bruce talked about the opportunity through Global Cities. We knew when we made this investment, we thought it was important to bring this initiative to Detroit so you could be a part of this evolving conversation, so you can learn the lessons of what's happening in other cities and figure out what can work here. Andrew Humphrey just asked the question about the role of the private sector, and I think it was a really important question, because I think the private sector has to do more. As cities are evolving, private sectors have to get involved too. They can't sit on the sidelines expecting the government or the nonprofit sector to address the challenges of today's economy, which is why we are doing the work we're doing. The fact is, one could argue that no bank, no business can survive if our urban areas fail. So that's why we're putting our resources and expertise to work. It's clear, I'll just say in closing, Detroit was once a cornerstone of the global economy, and through what gives me confidence being here today and seeing all of you and seeing the conversation is that you will come back, you will revitalize, and I think you'll be example for the rest of the world, and we will be very proud to have been a part of it. Thank you very much.